Okay, now from the site plan, let's go into some other views. Now these are going to be elevation views. Let's talk a little bit about annotating them. Now notice that again in the Canvas assignment we have update all views in your project with robust annotation. Now the building elevations or exterior elevations, they don't really need a lot of extra work, but I do want to point out a couple things here that could be very beneficial to you when it comes to actually seeing the elevation views in a way that's quite appealing or pleasing. Okay. So from the basic elevation views, these 4 that are included, what you should probably do is select any section symbols that you have in the elevation view and hide the category. Let's do this, hide category in the view. It's kind of distracting. We don't really want to see that. The next thing we want to do is make sure that the datum line work is updated so that it's somewhat close to the building, but not all that, not that jamming or, getting too close to it or something, because we do want to make it easy to read. The next thing is perhaps if you don't like the visibility of the site itself, this would be that element in the view specific, of course it's view specific, we need to hide it in the view. You could right click and then hide in view that element. Now from here, we're going to go into the datum line work and of course add elbows as necessary. Let's go ahead and do this right now and then bring the elbows over so that the entire name of the level is of course updated or visible at least, and so we can easily see it. That's again the whole point of annotation, and these datum elements as well is to make them easy to access, easy to read. Now what about the foundation? Now in this case, what I think I'll do is I'll select these foundation elements by a crossing window right here. And notice how much of them I'm catching with this crossing window. Just like in AutoCAD, you can catch this stuff in Revit as well. Now, since I've selected all these items, what I'd like to do is I'd like to change how they appear in the elevation view. Generally speaking, since the foundation information is going to be below grade, it might be a good idea to show this below grade. So once it's all selected, right click and then select Override Graphics in View by Element. And then from here, we'll make it halftone. And then also in the projection lines, let's change the object style from continuous over to dashed. Click Apply and then click OK. When we select away, now you can see what's happening. Now, the foundation information is still there, but it's now changed and de-emphasized because generally speaking, it would be underground and not quite visible from the elevation view if you're standing outside of the building looking at it. So this is a quick way to modify all of your exterior elevation views. Now, if you're not satisfied with how this worked out, you can always create a duplicate and then make lots of changes there. Now remember, part of this assignment is to duplicate certain views. Okay, so create copies of existing views and apply different styles. That's one of the bullet points in the task section in the assignment. So in this east elevation view, I'm going to right click and then I'm going to duplicate the view, and just with duplicate right there. Now this is a copy of the view, so everything that I've done to the original has carried over here. But what if I wanted to add some color or some depth cueing? Let's go ahead and do that. Change the detail level over to medium, of course, it's always a good idea. We'll go to consistent colors. And then from here, we'll also select the graphic display options. And from here, add some shadows, maybe cast some shadows and ambient shadows as well. Depth cueing, let's go ahead and show depth. Click apply. And there we go. Now something is a little different. It's kind of a different view. It looks a little foggy around the edges, but at least now you have something unique to look at in your project. So my suggestion is select some views that you think you might use in a pictorial fashion and then make modifications like this. Not exactly per the formula I just used, but find something yourself that you really like. Maybe even add some background information, bring the site back, and again, unhide that in view. Let's go ahead and select that right now and see what that looks like. I'm going to unhide this view and hide the site here. Turn the overlay off right there. And then maybe even take out the datum level lines if you'd like to. It's up to you. Make some customization to your files by duplicating views. And it's not just exterior elevations either. Interior elevations or section views can also be used to duplicate and then create something interesting looking, something pictorial or in color, maybe even a rendered view. All right, now from here, let's go down to the next element. And what I want to do, first of all, before we do this, let's go ahead and make sure that, of course, every one of your elevation views should be consistent. That's one of the things I always emphasize. So all of your exterior elevations that you're going to use for printing, they should all be consistent in appearance. All of the modified versions, like this copy right here, that you might want to rename into something else, make them consistent as well. So whatever styles you apply to your updated views, apply them to all of the views. Now, in the interior elevations, we can do the same thing. So here's this call-out view of stairs, or this elevation 1A of a building, or here's that, this other interior elevation view that I have in here from my other project. You can do this as well. As I said, you can modify these using different styles, depth queuing where possible, and so on. Now, some more annotation elements probably would be valuable here in this view, but since we have a callout, let's take a look at the callout. Now, I've already added one simple note in here, but I advise you for every one of your views, again, add robust annotation. So the more closely defined view that you have, in other words, if it's a callout view or a section view, especially a typical wall section view, if you have those, they need to be annotated robustly. Dimensions, plenty of notes, all kinds of information to help describe what the wall is made from, what we're seeing in the detail view, and so on. Now that's talked about a little bit in the assignment content in the pages that I've included with the project. But I wanted to do this video so that you had a little bit more idea of, again, go through every single view, and if that view requires annotation, detail views do, wall section views do. If it does require a lot of annotation, add that with notes. Notes with leaders, dimensions, and other information, just general notes if you need to. It's always a good idea. Now, we're going to move on from this and talk a little bit about schedules next. When we're taking a look at schedules, one of the best places to actually start, believe it or not, is a floor plan, because floor plans do show all of the elements that will be in a schedule view generally, because they're visible in that plan view. For example, right now I'm in the second floor plan. As you can see, I've already tagged all of the windows in the second floor plan, as well as this one doorway. Now, the doorway itself is a door, and it's tagged with door number 4. In your project, you'll have a category called Schedules, Quantities All, and if you start tagging features, you'll also have a door schedule. Double-click the door schedule to open it up, and you'll see something that looks a bit like a spreadsheet, and here it is. We have door number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, doors 1 and 2 are actually garage doors. They're this type 57, and you can actually see the door size right here. It's 96 inches wide by 84 inches tall, so that's an 8-foot wide garage door. Now, we don't have any manufacturer information in here. We can kind of select anything, but there really isn't anything from the actual type, from the Revit family that was installed here. The model number is not in here either, but if there is anything in that information, it will show up here. Now, what I want to point your attention to is the way that the numbering sequence occurs. Let's go back to that second floor plan for a second and notice that door number 4 is this doorway. If I go to the door schedule and I select the value for door 4 and I simply type over it right here and call it door number 5 instead and click enter, if we go back to the second floor plan, it's now updated in our floor plan view. So if for some reason you're finding that door numbers are a little bit strange, maybe it starts at door number 8 or door number 9 or something, don't worry about that. You can always go back in your door schedule and renumber the doors the way you want them, and the floor plan tags will follow. Also note that if we're in the schedule, we can take a look at this from this schedule view. It's just, like I said, like a spreadsheet. It doesn't really look that interesting to us. But we can do some things in here. For example, if I wanted to add or delete some fields from the schedule, I can click the Edit button. And notice I have all of this information defaulting in here. But for some reason in my schedule, if I don't want to show every single one of these elements, I might want to take this out a little bit, like frame material. I may want to remove that. What about finish? Well, I'll remove that too. Let's leave comments and description in here. Sill, we'll delete that. Jam, head, and all these fire ratings, yeah. Frame type, we really don't need that right now. Model number, manufacturer, maybe the rest of this we'll leave alone. Now, you can see I've just been using the remove parameter tool, but if you wanted to add a parameter as well, you can, and it's this little button right here. So in your list of available parameters, that's where it exists. If you like it, click add, and then it will bring it back into that into the actual used field. Let's click OK and see what happens. Now, as you can see, the schedule is much smaller. There's only 5 columns, or 5 categories, or parameters rather, that we're going to be using in the schedule. Now, if I don't like the position of where they are, I can always change them. So for example, if I want to move type to something below description, I can just resort it this way, click OK, and now door size, or this D column, has now been moved over. Okay, description is now ahead of it. But maybe I didn't like that. I want to switch it back, so let's do this. Let's go back to description. Let's move it back up, and then let's go type mark and move this So what we have right here. Okay, so description is now needing to move a little bit further over anyway. So let's take description and move it down a couple of, until it's right there next to comments. You don't need everything in here. What you probably should do is have at least a few columns and then add some information if you'd like to in the comments field or description. Now, what about filtering? Let's click the filter edit button right here. And notice that these are all tabbed. So here we have fields. Again, it corresponds to what we're seeing here in our type selector. We have a filtering function. We can filter these based on the kinds of doors or windows we want to, but if you had a huge project, this might be available to you and it might be more practical. So we can probably leave the filtering tab alone. But what about sorting and grouping? Maybe we want to sort not by mark or the number, but maybe by the mark type or the description or something else. That's what this sorting and grouping is all about. Formatting, well, it just gives you an opportunity to change the appearance of the schedule as it will be on a sheet. There's that appearance tab right there, and again, it shows some more information like what does the schedule actually look like when it's on the sheet. So we're going to leave these in the default setting right now. And then let's go to one of our sheets. Let's open it up. And right here on the cover sheet, might as well use this as an example, and let's drop that schedule in here. So I'll take this door schedule and I'll just drag it onto the sheet like anything else, and then maybe move it into this position just to kind of demonstrate what it will look like. Okay, and there it is. So if you didn't like the appearance of this, you could always change it. You could either double click it here, which opens up the page we were just on, and then you can change the appearance of things by, instead of using thin lines, let's go to wide lines instead and click OK. Let's go back to the sheet, okay, and we can zoom in. We can see that the lines are actually a little bit wider now, and it will maybe print a little bit heavier for you. You can also change the font if you'd like to, or something like that. It's basically up to you. How you want to style it, it's your choice. It's your project, but make it look interesting and make sure that the information for your schedules is relevant. Now, right now I'm going to delete this one because I don't really want to show it on the cover sheet. But what about window schedules? Basically, it's the same thing. Here's our window schedule. And right now, we only have one type of window shown. It's type 60. It is this wide. Now, in your project, there's going to be several more of these types of windows. You probably will use 3 or 4 or 5 different types of windows. And again, you can go through the same process and narrow down the amount of fields you're going to show in your schedule. Just make sure it's going to fit on the schedule sheet. You have a sheet that is going to be nothing but schedules, and so you're going to want to arrange them in a certain way. Make sure you do that and make sure that, again, all of this information is relevant to you and to people who are watching, not necessarily just a lot of extra information you're not ever going to fill in. One of the last things you'll do in any real architectural project is take some of the technical work you've already done. Your entire house is now designed, annotated, views are now being added to sheets, and the project is being organized and ready to go to permitting. But at some point, you're probably going to be in a position where a client or someone else in your industry is going to want to take a look at some pictorial views. These are interesting views. They're pretty pictures, but there is a way you can make these in Revit, and it's not terribly sophisticated. It doesn't take a lot of time. There is a built-in rendering engine, and I'll show you how to create this image that you're seeing on your screen, as well as a truly rendered image as well. Now, if you remember back from some of the work you did in the actual Revit class, we explored this a little bit, but not terribly sophisticated. And because this is a capstone project of the classes you're taking from me, let's walk you through some of the process to create views like this. Now, in your project browser, notice that we have a 3D views category, and that's pretty much it. We have a default 3D view, but this 3D view number 2 I created using a camera. Let's create another one. Let's go up to the View tab, which is already selected, and then in the Split button for 3D View, select the Camera button right here. Now, before we do that, we need to go to a relevant view. So in this case, a floor plan view would be required because we need to actually place the camera somewhere within our floor plan so we can see our project geometry. Now the Split button camera actual button itself, the tool, is now highlighted and ready to go. I'm going to click one time to place it in about this position, move my cursor somewhere else well beyond the project geometry, click a second time to actually create the entire view. I'm a little bit too close to project geometry right now, so I'm going to make some adjustments. First, I'm just going to scroll out a little bit. Now I'm going to select my crop region with these control grips and move the crop region out so I can see the entire project. It always makes sense to actually see the entire project, okay? Now, I don't necessarily need to see a lot of the property behind there, so that centers the view pretty nicely. If I wanted a more dramatic view, I might crop it a little bit more like this and extend it out and maybe have some words or annotation out here. But instead, I think I'll leave it nice and widescreen, maybe something like this, okay? Now, you're certainly free to change the shape of the crop region however you want for this 3D camera view. However, once you get to be, somewhere in there, just let's move on to the next phase. Look in your properties palette right now and notice what we're seeing. We have a camera category right now because that's how this was created. Notice we have a perspective mode right here. We can change this to orthographic, but let's leave it in perspective because it's more natural to our eyes. We have an eye elevation, which right now is at 5 feet 6, a very common height for a center of a lens or a sensor on a camera. If we wanted to change this to something else like 16 feet, however, notice that now we're up in the air. We're like a drone flying around the house, taking video or pictures of the house itself. But let's move this thing back to 6 feet. Now, you can certainly create whatever perspective you want for your project. I'm going to go with something somewhat default here. I'm going to change the eye target elevation, not the eye elevation, the target elevation to 16 feet so I look up a little bit more at my project. And then I'll just go ahead and adjust the scope of the box a little bit more, maybe something like that. Now, I've created all my adjustments for my camera perspective. I like the direction I'm looking, but what if I want to kind of walk around or zoom around a little bit? In the view, there's this little paper airplane icon, this fly icon. Click on that, and then your cursor changes to these two curved opposing arrows. If you click your left mouse button down, you can kind of just change the overall angle of the view. Also on your keyboard, you have your 4 arrow directional keys. If I move to the right, I walk to the right. Move back to the left, move further away from the project or closer to it. So you can make some fine-tuning adjustments from there. Let's say that you get to where you want though and you want to create this view exactly and you're all set to go. Click Modify to cancel the command. And now let's start in making some changes down here in our visual styles. Let's set the visual style over to fine for the detail level. Let's go from the hidden line over to realistic this time. Now, realistic is going to give me some ambient shadows and some surface finishes as I would predict. But I don't really like the concentration of all the extra lines or edges around here. So click on that one more time, click Graphic Display Options, and then let's turn off a couple of things. Now, show edges, I don't want to see these. Smooth lines, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. There's some other options you can add here as well. You can add a background here if you want to. Realistic gives you some exposure functions and so on. You can kind of play around with these options if you'd like to. But again, I'm going to accept most of the default values here. And then when I'm done, I'll click Apply. And you can see what's been updated. And then I'll click OK. Now at this point, again, notice the crop region of the overall view. You can change it a little bit if you'd like to. I think I'll maybe just fine tune it slightly more, something like that, to kind of offset the perspective of the view so that maybe kind of the rule of thirds, we're kind of looking at that edge of the building right there. Okay. Now, this again has created a new view, and you can certainly rename this. I actually suggest you do this because selecting these various views might be a little confusing otherwise. But that goes for anything in your project browser. All right, now let's actually start to do a rendering. Here in Revit, in the View tab, there is a presentation panel and a render button. Go ahead and click that render button. You will get this rendering dialog box that comes up. Now the render button up here actually starts the rendering process, but there are some options to change here as well. The quality setting, let's go from draft quality to high, or anything you want. Really, I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes. I'll go ahead and leave the output settings at screen, and you can see that the overall pixel size will show up this way. Now, there's a couple things you can change about this, and if you wanted to create a different crop of this view, this is where you would need to do it. But once that crop region is set in place, the actual image file that will be created due to the rendering or from the rendering engine is going to stay at that actual perspective. In other words, the overall size of the image is going to be fixed in place. Now you can scale the image up and down, but you can't recrop it after this unless you used Photoshop or some other third-party software. I'm going to go ahead and accept the rest of these default values here. I'm not going to do anything else to exposure. Now you can certainly add lighting or change some things, add sun or all of that. But if I go ahead to click the render button, Revit will now start to do the rendering itself. You'll get a progress bar at the bottom, and this progress bar might be a little slower for you or a little faster. My computer is fairly new, so as I'm kind of talking right now, don't worry, this may take some time depending on the quality settings. Now it will get done here pretty soon, and then when you're all done, this is what you have. This will be our actual rendered view. Now, if you don't like this, you can always do it again. You can change some things or whatever. But for right now, I'll just accept this. And before I do anything else, To save the view, I need to click the Save to Project button. Before you do, though, notice that in your project browser, there's no renderings category, but as soon as you click Save to Project and give it a name, now there is. There's a renderings category down here, and then we can simply close the dialog box. Now when we do, it goes back to that other view style that we had before. Don't worry though, the actual rendering is still preserved in your project. Go ahead and click Save in your project right now to save your overall project. There it is right there. Double click to open it up again, and there you go. Now the only thing I can do for size changing is click on the actual rendering and then move the overall size of pixels up and down. You can see here in the type selector a few values are changing a little bit. But again, all you're really doing is zooming in and out. You're kind of just changing the overall image size. You're not recropping it at all. So experiment with this a couple of times. And if you like the perspective that you've shown in this rendering, as you place it on your cover sheet, that's good. But if you don't, you're going to have to redo the render and then change the overall cropping size to something a little more interesting. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for this video review. Some insights. I know it's a lengthy video, or maybe even split into a couple videos. It's lengthy, but there's a lot of information to get to here. And if you, of course, have any questions at all, definitely reach out to me as soon as possible. I'll be happy to help. As always, everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you real soon.